Heyo people, and welcome to this edition of Request Rundown. All of these albums were requested by the lovelies over on Patreon. We still have a handful of releases we need to knock off that list here. They've been sitting around for a little while now. We should probably take care of some of this. So let's start out with good old Nightwish and their new record, Human Nature? I'm not supposed to pronounce that thing in the middle, right? Because I'm not gonna. But whoo boy, Nightwish, this band, they are basically one of the go-to bands when people talk about symphonic metal. It's like them, Epica, I'd say Within Temptation, and Therion? Would Therion be a good pick? If I had to make a big four of symphonic metal, they'd probably fit the bill, right? Even if you know nothing about symphonic metal, though, you probably know something about Nightwish. If only because... the memes! I've poked my head in from time to time to see what they've been up to here and there. But I should just let you all know that while I am familiar with this band, I don't religiously follow them or anything. I'm not a super fan. I haven't been tracing their career all throughout the years. I've only kept a very casual eye on this band. So this album, this review is definitely gonna be kind of a pleb's eye view perspective. You know, like with all my reviews. And from what I understand, this band has gone through a lot of changes over the years, particularly very recently, in both lineup and sound and style. Not to mention this record here is a double album that's supposed to be one of their biggest, boldest, and most experimental moves ever. They're complete with an entire second disc that's nothing but an orchestral suite. This is a big album with big goals and big expectations. So how do I think it did? Honestly, pretty alright. You know, this is a bit of an interesting case. It honestly could just be because I am somewhat of a casual Nightwish fan. Having heard this record, at least the first half, while I agree this certainly isn't like Nemo anymore, it's not like the band sounds bad. They certainly haven't degraded over time. These guys just have it nailed down to a science at this point. When you tell someone to picture what symphonic metal is in their head, if, they aren't the kind of person who's a total scene nerd and knows all the cool, obscure shit you're too lame to have heard of. When you tell the average Joe to picture what symphonic metal is in their heads, this is probably the stuff that they're gonna think of. The orchestral arrangements are absolutely gorgeous, with tons of soaring strings, tinkly and glittery piano work, and sweeping and ominous chorale vocals just all over the place. All of it further driven by Floor Jensen's magnificent soprano. Good lord, does this woman have a truly impressive set of pipes. She's a truly operatic and very bombastic presence on this album. And all of it is held together with some very rhythmic and punishing guitar and bass riffage, along with the perfect amount of punching, forceful drum work. It makes the first half of this record outstandingly appealing. It's very pretty, outstandingly composed, and just edgy enough to give you the attitude you need in an album like this without being too intrusive. I'd say this album is definitely more symphonic than metal, probably even more so than some of their other records that they've put out. This leans on the symphonic side, most definitely, but it's still a very pleasant ride. I was really enjoying this album. At least the first disc. So, okay, this is where the review starts to get a little tricky. Like I mentioned, this is a double record, and the second disc of this album is an almost entirely instrumental 8-part 30-minute orchestral suite called All the Works of Nature Which Adorn the World. It's a hell of a title. I hate to admit it, but I honestly just wasn't feeling this as much. It's not bad. It's not bad at all. It's actually very lovely, extremely well composed, and it's just a nice little bit of flexing. This is a big orchestral flex. But here's the thing, like the second disc, it's not being sold as like a bonus. It's not being sold as like additional tracks. It's not like a cool little extra to the album. This is part of the album, proper. So I have to consider that in my review, and like when disc 1 ends and you put this thing on, or if you're listening to it on streaming and it just makes the transition into disc 2, you hear that orchestral suite start up, and like, man, especially when counterbalanced against disc 1, man, this is going for such a different mood. I just gotta admit it, there is a bit of sonic whiplash going on here. The first disc of this record and the second seem to have very little that actually joined them together as one unit. And again, the second disc doesn't feel like it's trying to say something or add something to the rest of the album, like to serve as a big punctuation mark. It doesn't really connect to the first half of this album. It's really just flexing, you know? It's good flexing, it's very big and meaty flexing. It does just feel like flexing. It feels weirdly soulless, you know? And it's odd to say that about orchestral music, you know what I mean? Again, it might just be like an unfair comparison between disc 1 and disc 2, but if you're gonna take this album, as one cohesive whole, well, it's not. It doesn't do a good job of establishing that whole mood. It just feels like two very separate parts that kind of clash against each other a bit. Sometimes when you smush two good things together, that doesn't necessarily combine into one thing that's crazy good. You just get, well, two things that are just awkwardly smushed together, and that's what this album is. It's not the chocolate and peanut butter comparison. If you want something that's a symphonic metal rager, hey, disc 1 will definitely hit the spot. And if you're just more into straight up symphonic orchestral stuff, then disc 2 will serve as a nice little out of left field treat. But again, when you take the package as a whole, weirdly enough, it kind of drags both of them down, even though they are both pretty solid on their own. My recommendation here is spin whichever of these discs sounds like it's more up your alley, because listening to this album as a whole, I'm sorry, the two pieces, while they're both good, they just don't work together particularly well. And that is kind of a shame to say. You know, I don't think this is a huge bomb or a huge blunder. It's just, especially at 86 minutes, man, this can be a long sit if you're not feeling any particular part of it. Again, taken on their own, they work, but pushed together like this, they don't work as well. So, I don't know, it might seem cheap. I feel you if, you know, you feel like that's cheap or that's not fair, but I had to sit through the whole thing, and judging the record as a whole, it's got problems, but I feel like none of them are deal breakers. You'll still get a lot out of this record. Human Nature gets 3.5 Lucky Charms with vodka out of 5. See, both of those things, they're good on their own, but you mix them together, yeah, you wouldn't want to do that. Maybe if you're hungover. In this moment, yeah, now here's a band people have been trying to get me into for a long time here. They've been around since around 2005, and I've caught them like here and there from time to time, a stray single here and there. In fact, I've actually seen them live once. Technically, at last year's Sonic Temple, me and the Rock Coliseum peeps did a fun little fan meetup. and we accidentally scheduled it during their sets. While I've heard of them, and I'm certainly familiar with their work, I've never taken the full album plunge with them before. This is the first full album of theirs I sat through, front to back. Honestly, for as hyped as this band has been to me over the years, I was excited to finally get a chance to, hear what they're all about. And after hearing this record in particular, man, I hope they're about more than this. Okay, it's not just me that's feeling this way about this record, right? I spun this thing several times. I tried to settle into its groove. I kept as open of a mind as I could about it, and wow, this album is just crazy boring, isn't it? Honestly, that's got me in dread about writing this particular review, because I don't know, this is a band that's been hyped up to me as a big goddamn deal over all these years, and now that I finally have a chance to review them, they put out an album that gives me almost nothing to talk about. Oh, damn it, these are always the worst ones to do. And it's not like they didn't try here either. They did everything they could to make this stick out, particularly in the amount of covers on this thing. 3 covers on this album: a Steve Miller cover, a Mazzy Star cover, and an honest-to-God Queen cover. Like, you could tell they were trying to go over the top with this one. They were trying to make it stick out, but man, that Mazzy Star cover is just dozy and forgettable. The Steve Miller cover, look, I'm sorry, but we did not need another version of Fly Like an Eagle. We didn't. We really didn't. In my opinion, we didn't even need the first one. Ooh, shade. I know that's controversial. I don't like Steve Miller. And this band straight up had the oves to cover Queen's We Will Rock You. You shoot for the Queen, you better not miss. And they even went to the trouble to bring on Taylor Momsen and Lizzie freaking Hale to provide backups on this track, and my God, a Queen cover with Taylor Momsen and Lizzie Hale on it should not be this freaking dull. How do you even accomplish that? How do you get Lizzie Hale and Taylor Momsen in a room to sing Queen and make it boring? That's almost impressive on its own. Shit. And man, I want to say more about this record, but what do I say? What am I supposed to talk about here? Absolutely everything else on this record is either dozy and forgettable, or just boring and generic. Same basic hard rock riffs and beats, pseudo-dark and pseudo-gothic lyrics and themes, and I can tell Maria Brink is a good singer, and I've heard Maria Brink deliver a banging performance before on other singles that I've heard from this band, but on this album, she just sounds tired and sleepy, and she has very little passion on this. While I'm not a seasoned expert on this band's sound, I can tell that they can do better than this. This album just reeks of wasted potential. That makes it feel even worse, You can just tell that this is a band that has the chutzpah to put out something good, but whatever it was, it did not show up on this album. It makes me wonder if there isn't some kind of internal band tension, or if there was trouble with the label, or if there was other shenanigans going on in the background here, because I feel like in this moment should be able to deliver a better album than this. And that's coming from someone who isn't a diehard fan or anything. I want to stick up for this band more than I am on this review. Like I say, I've heard them do better on other albums, on other singles I've heard in passing, but just this record, I don't know if this is your first exposure to In This Moment. With me particularly, I can say this is not the place you want to start. Mother gets 2.5 disappointed mothers out of 5. You see, that's worse than have an angry mom. You don't want, angry mom sucks, but it's always worse when mother is disappointed in you. That's what we've got here. This album made me It made me a disappointed mom. I am your disappointed mom. Go clean your room. Gordon Lightfoot. Okay. I guess the unofficial theme of this episode is bands and artists who are kinda out of my depth. But Gordon Lightfoot, while again he's another guy I wouldn't say I'm an expert on, he is still an artist that basically needs no introduction, am I right? At least if you're Canadian. I mean, Gordon Lightfoot is basically a folk legend up there. Everyone from the Tragically Hip to Bob Dylan have cited this man as an inspiration, and the work he's left behind has left such an impact across music as a whole that you just can't deny his influence. He is an important name in the folk and even the pop music scene in general. Again, particularly if you're Canadian. Like, dude's a big deal in Canada. Canada takes care of their own, what can I tell you? That having been said, even though this guy is definitely a very big deal, I just can't say I have much direct knowledge about the man or his work, outside of his most well-known stuff at least. I'm definitely a greatest hits bitch when it comes to his work. I know, what's that song about, The Wrecked Boat? That's a good one. I do this professionally. Again, we have an album where you're probably getting the pleb's eye view of things, but I'm willing to at least let you people know what I saw in solo, from my own limited perspective at least, and you know, this record is difficult. Its very nature makes it a hard record to review. Let me explain. Apparently, this album isn't an According to Hoyle record. It's a collection of songs Gordon recorded on his own around 2001-2002 or so. You could almost call this like sort of like a demo collection or an album of practice takes, almost. This isn't something that he went into the studio with a team, spent lots of time and money to polish up and make a proper album. No, this album basically amounts to, hey, I found a bunch of cool shit in my closet, want to see it? So grading it like a proper record just isn't fair, and that's not what I'm gonna do here. But for what this album amounts to, at least, you know, a bunch of practice takes hammered out with not much more than an acoustic and a microphone, taken on those merits, I do honestly gotta say that, man, I get why this guy gets talked up so much. He's a very earnest songwriter, his lyrics have a lot of passion and weight, and man, to think all of this sounds good on what basically amounts to practice takes, unfinished cuts, like this stuff right here, these are the rough edges. Damn, I wish my rough edges sounded a millionth as good as this. Dude, you can't necessarily call this an album per se, at least in the most traditional sense, but what it does serve as is a testament to the old principle I've always preached for years, that if you can strip a song down to its basic, core, fundamental elements, and it still sounds fantastic, then you've got a good song on your hands. And this album definitely feels like it accomplishes that goal. These are stripped down, these are bare bones, basic, and you know, they aren't even really polished. Like, it's not like Lightfoot doesn't have problems on this record. Like, his attempts at whistling are cute, frankly, and the dude's, you know, weathered, grizzled old voice can get a little, maybe too weathered and grisly in places, but you know, the dude is just so insanely talented. He knows his way around a hook, he knows how to write a melody that will get into your heart, and he can write lyrics that do feel genuinely touching. Like, the dude, even when he's not like trying his 100% best, man, he's still got a lot of magic in him. And again, even if this record isn't like you know, album of the year material or anything, again, it's not intended to be. it's a weird little curio that he just found and decided to share with the world. And you know, when even your odds and ends sound this good, man, that really does say something. Solo gets 4 demo cuts out of 5.
Through his veins like 1,000 railroad trains.
Holy crap, I never thought I'd see the day, but it got requested. I'm not just limited to rock anymore, so... Hey everyone, it's Swamp Dogg! Hey Swamp Dogg! Anyone who's been on this channel for a hot minute knows the original D-O-double-G here from my Bad Album Cover series. And, oh people, my god, this man has so many bad album covers. I could do an entire video on his bad album covers alone. And I might someday. Yeah, the thing about that, like, Swamp Dogg, I haven't been able to mention it because we've never had the chance to, but behind those awful covers, dude, honestly, legit has some pretty decent chops. He was an excellent soul and R&B singer with a lot of vocal range, a lot of genuine charisma, and a solid as hell understanding of a good hook. Seriously, as much as we dogged Rat On back in the first episode, like, Creeping Away? Dude, that's a legit bop. And the cool thing about Swamp Dogg too is that after many, many years in the shadow of a lot of other acts and changing tides and such, the dude recently has been kind of having a career resurgence. His last album, Love, Loss, and Autotune, was actually put together with help from Ryan Olsen and Justin Vernon of all people. Yeah, the Bon Iver guy. And that album...
Watch television and be lonely.
I'd be lying if I said I didn't love it. Love, Loss, and Autotune dealt with a lot of themes surrounding death and loss, particularly that of his wife, who had recently passed, and this record continues in that same general trajectory, only this time I'd say he's cranked up the melancholy vibes quite a few notches, if only on style alone. This album goes in a complete 180. This is a straight-up country album. Soul Scene's original Nasty Boy went out and put out an album full of mournful and touching country songs. It sounds like a joke, but quit laughing because this album is actually pretty fucking good. The production here really just excellently brings Swamp Dogg's greatest strengths out and lets him showcase his capabilities as a songwriter. Like, man, when Dogg is lamenting about lost love on Sleeping Without You as a Drag, preaching about the effect of poverty and drugs in the community and family pain, or simply telling the sad story of a newborn who will never get to meet his mother in Billy, man, the dude has a gravitas and conviction and he just sells it all like it's gospel. And for a guy who throughout the bulk of his career seems to never take himself too seriously, hearing him just bare his entire fucking soul on this record, like, man, it makes me think he should have tried this sooner if he didn't pigeonhole himself into being a joke. Like, this guy could have been something else, I'm telling you. And whether that was justified or not is certainly open to debate. I'm not saying the dude didn't entirely deserve some of the criticisms he got. It's nice that, if only for a few records here, if only for a brief little bit in his career stretch, that, you know, he was able to get people to see that he was worth taking seriously. No gimmicks, no comedy bullshit, just a man bearing his soul for us to see with all the honesty he was capable of presenting it with. And you know, I'm glad we finally got to see him make those records in his career. Because you know, the dude was legitimately talented all throughout his career. He really was. It's good that we finally got to see this side of Swamp Dogg, even though, you know, the tragic circumstances that brought about this album, certainly, I certainly don't envy that or anything, but like, man, it did bring out some of the best music of this man's career, you know, so You know, I'm glad people have finally got at least a chance to see Swamp Dogg for how talented and capable of an artist he really is. Sorry You Couldn't Make It gets 4.5 actually pretty decent album covers out of 5. What did you think? Have you heard any of these albums yet? Feel free to let me know what you thought about them in the comments below. If you like what you see, feel free to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell while you're at it. In the meantime though, I'm Crash Thompson, and I'll see you in the next video.
Super special thanks to Brandon Brown.